Hey there, today I wanted to make a Chiz guide. Let's start with a breakdown of her kit and how she works. Obviously we have her basic attack. There's not much to say about most characters' basic attacks. You just attack and it does damage. But with Chiz you can hold her attack on mobs and gain fawns every day, up to 40k fawns daily and up to 500k total lifetime fawns at Tycoon level 25 plus. Let's get into her E ability. The one thing to note about her E ability is that it cannot crit. Another thing to note is that the E ability has 3 stages and it does different damage depending on that, but all you really need to do is tap E whenever it's up. Another thing to note is you can hold E to drain grain and get a damage buff. This is not something we're going to use until we have her C4, as we have not enough grain generation to use it. And her E does damage based on how much grain you have. Then we have her ult, which is gonna enter you into the stock market. The only thing you really need to know is you want to press E when the stock market is up to gain more grain, so your E does more damage. And her E has 100% crit rate on the first E after her ult. That is the short end of what you need to do with her ult. Then we have her passive, which both of them is just going to be charge efficiency, so you can get her ult faster, which is good because that's a big burst damage. Let's get into her build. There isn't too much to say about her build. The only stats she wants is Cosmo damage and flat damage or universal damage. That's the only 2 stats she wants. A third stat could be crit damage for that one E that has 100% crit rate. Then you have her signature weapon. That's the only weapon we're gonna use. Just make sure you have 1 million fawns in your back. Then we have her gear. As said, all she wants is Cosmo damage and damage percentage. That's all you're looking for. Obviously we're gonna use the Lost Radiance set for the Cosmo damage increase and the ignore of enemy defense after casting your ultimate, which is a significant damage increase when doing her burst. I'm just showing you my gear here. Everything has damage percentage, everything else we don't really care about. But you can get crit damage for a slight oomph, and you can get attack percentage, although it's not that useful for her. That is gonna be all her gear. Let's get into team comps. The first team comp is gonna be Hotori, Jiuyan and Chiz. This is to proc Blossom Cycles, and with this one, you just wanna alt spam on Hotori for extra damage and time stop to help Chiz as the main DPS. Then we have the Mint, Jiuyan, Hanel, Chiz team. You want Hanel here for your mint to buff her attack if your mint is built. If your mint isn't built, there isn't any point in playing this team, but it's basically just playing quick swap between mint and Chiz with Hanel to buff. Then we're gonna have the Jiuyan Chiz team with Bai Chong and Daffodil for the Scorch proc and the Blossom proc. This is gonna be a quick swap comp between Bai Chong and Chiz, with Jiuyan to group them up and Daffodil for extra break and Scorch procs. Let's get into the rotation of the first team. You're gonna start out with Jiuyan Q, and then you're gonna use her E right after to group the mobs. Then you're gonna use Hotori ultimate so we can get that cooldown going for her next ultimate. Remember to do 3 plunge attacks on Hotori and then auto attack. After Hotori ult, we're gonna instantly swap into Chiz for her ult while the mobs are still grouped. Obviously press E whenever the stock market is up for the most damage. After we are done with her ult, we're gonna quick swap into Jiuyan, and if your E isn't up, you can just heavy attack with her and swap out. And then whenever your Hotori energy is up, you should swap to Hotori. Ideally you use Jiuyan E skill before Hotori ult to group the mobs every time. And then after Hotori ult, we just repeat the same rotation as before. Pretty simple, not much to it. Let's get into the next rotation with Hanel and Mint. We're gonna start with Hanel ult and then Hanel E, and swap cancel her E. Then we're gonna do Jiuyan Q into Jiuyan E to group the mobs. Then we're gonna do Mint ult for while the mobs are grouped for most damage into Chiz ult. And then we're just gonna swap between Chiz and Mint. So we just wanna use all our Chiz E. Once we have no more E, you're gonna swap into Mint, do her skill, and then swap into Chiz, do her skill. Then you wanna swap into Hanel whenever your E runs out, and use her E and swap into Jiuyan and group the mobs back up. And then you're just gonna use Chiz E on cooldown, Mint E on cooldown, and that's the rotation for that. You just repeat that rotation over and over again. Let's get into the next rotation with Bai Xiang. First you start with Jiuyan Q and then Jiuyan E. Then we're gonna go into Chiz so you can get her ult started, because that's our most burst damage in this comp. So we can start getting energy for the next ult right away. After that you're gonna swap into Bai Xiang, you're gonna use his ult, his skills, and then you're gonna hold right click, let go, hold right click, let go, and do that to animation cancel his attack. After his ult is almost out, you're gonna swap into Chiz, use her 3 skills, swap into Bai Xiang, then swap into Jiuyan to group the mobs back up, swap into Chiz to use his skills, swap into Bai Xiang, do 4 attacks, swap into Chiz, do his skills, swap into Bai Xiang, use her 4 attacks, swap into Jiuyan to use his skills, swap into Chiz to use her attacks. If her ult is up, you should use Jiuyan E whenever you have Chiz ult up, so you can group them before Chiz ult, as that's the big burst in your combo. And then you're just gonna quick swap between Chiz and Bai Xiang every time, 4 to 5 attacks on Bai Xiang, then into Chiz to use her E, then back to Bai Xiang, then into Chiz. And that's gonna be the rotation. You're just gonna quick swap like that. Just try and feel it out. It's pretty hard to write a full rotation guide on this, as you basically just have to quick swap all the time. Let's get into Chiz Awakenings. The first one is just gonna increase your storage capacity by 10%. So if you have 10,000, you're gonna get 11,000. Next one is gonna increase how fast you gain grain when you're in the surplus state. The third one is gonna make stock market more likely to have plus stock market, so it's easier to press E on her ult. Then you're gonna get better grain efficiency on her 4, and then Chiz 5 gives you a full grain when you start combat, and her 6 gives 15% Cosmo damage. My recommended is C6, C1, C3, C2, C4, and then C5. That is my recommended order of unlocking her awakenings. That's the best way to do it. Now let's get into her gifts. Obviously, Chiz gifts, best or most affordable one is gonna be Punch Taro at 100 points and 450 fonts. Her second best bang for your buck is gonna be the Fantasia, 200 points at 3000 fonts. That's gonna be the 2 gifts you're looking for. Yellow if you wanna level faster, green if you wanna save more fonts. That's gonna be everything for the Chiz guide. Hope you enjoy NTE and see you next time.